The gun was still smoking when Ezra Blackwood realized what he'd done. Two men lay dead in the Texas dust, their blood mixing with the desert sand, outside Brownsville. The woman stared at him through swollen eyes, her 6-year-old daughter clinging to torn skirts. He'd come for weapons, black market Colts to sell up north. Instead, he'd just become a killer again. The traffickers had called it clearing inventory, unwanted merchandise, bound for the worst kind of hell. But when the child bit the man's hand as he dragged her mother toward the brothel wagon, something snapped inside the former Union cavalry officer. Now Catalina Morales and her daughter Elena stood free, and Ezra Blackwood was a wanted man. The distant sound of hoofbeats echoed across the plains. A posse, maybe, or worse, the rest of the trafficking ring. What price would a man pay for doing what's right? And when the law comes calling, where do you run when there's nowhere left to hide? Tell us in the comments. Have you ever been to the wild borderlands of South Texas? Hit that subscribe button for more tales from the lawless frontier. Ezra's ranch sat in a hollow between mesquite-covered hills, 40 miles from nowhere. No neighbors, no law, no questions asked. Until now. Catalina hadn't spoken during the brutal ride. She sat rigid behind him on the horse, arms wrapped around her daughter, dark eyes scanning the horizon like a trapped animal. When they reached the cabin, she slid down without accepting his offered hand. "You can sleep in the back room," Ezra said, dismounting. His voice was rough from years of silence. "There's clean water. Food." She studied his weathered face, searching for the catch. There was always a catch. "What do you want from us?" The question hung in the evening air like gun smoke. Ezra pulled the saddle from his horse, his movements deliberate, controlled, the same way he'd moved before killing those men. "Nothing you don't want to give." But Catalina knew better than to trust a man's words, especially one who could kill without hesitation. That first night, she barricaded the door with a chair and kept the kitchen knife under her pillow. Elena slept fitfully, whimpering in Spanish. Through the thin walls, Catalina heard Ezra moving around the main room, pacing, drinking, the clink of a whiskey bottle against glass. She'd seen the scars when he'd rolled up his sleeves to wash the blood from his hands. Old wounds, war wounds. This man had killed before today. By morning, she'd made her decision. They would leave. Take his horse if necessary. Ride for the border. Disappear into Mexico, where her sister lived. But when she opened the bedroom door, Elena was gone. Panic shot through her like lightning. She ran to the main room, bare feet slapping against rough wood floors. Through the window, she saw them. Ezra, kneeling by the well, showing Elena how to draw water. The child's hands were tiny on the rope. His were gentle, patient. "Mama," Elena called, when she spotted her. "Senor Ezra says I'm strong like my papa was." Catalina's breath caught. Elena hadn't mentioned her father in months. The fever that took him had been too terrible, too final. Yet here she was, smiling for the first time since Mexico. Ezra looked up, meeting Catalina's gaze across the yard. Something passed between them. Not trust, not yet. But a recognition. Two people who'd lost everything, trying to protect what little remained. "She's hungry," he said simply. "I was making breakfast." Inside, the cabin smelled of coffee and frying eggs. Simple food, but more than they'd seen in weeks. Ezra moved around the kitchen with surprising grace for such a large man. His hands were scarred, but clean. When he set the plate before Elena, he didn't hover or demand gratitude. Catalina watched him pour coffee into 3 tin cups. Black, bitter, strong, the kind that kept you alert when danger rode the wind. "Those men you killed," she said quietly, while Elena ate. "Others will come looking. I know. Why did you do it? Ezra stared into his coffee. In the morning light, she could see gray threading through his dark hair, lines carved deep around green eyes that had seen too much. Because some things are worth the risk. His gaze lifted to hers, and Catalina felt something shift in her chest. Not attraction. Not yet. But something deeper. Recognition, maybe. The look of someone who understood that choices had consequences, and sometimes you chose anyway. Outside, a hawk circled high above the mesquite, waiting, watching, just like the men who would come for them. 3 weeks passed before the fever took Elena. It started with a cough, then shivers that wouldn't stop. By the second day, her small body burned like a forge. Typhoid, the killer that stalked frontier towns and isolated ranches alike. Catalina had seen it before. Back in Sonora, it had taken half her village, including her husband. "We need medicine," she whispered, pressing a cool cloth to Elena's forehead. "Quinine, from town." Ezra stood in the doorway, hat in his hands. They both knew what going to town meant. He was a wanted man now. The sheriff's posters had his name, his description. Ezra Blackwood, armed and dangerous. Reward for information. "I'll go at first light. They'll recognize you." "Maybe." He settled the hat on his head. "But she'll die without it." Catalina caught his wrist as he turned to leave. His skin was warm, rough with calluses and scars. She'd watched these hands, gentle, a spooked horse, mend a broken fence, stroke Elena's hair, when the child cried out in fever dreams. "Don't go," she breathed. "Please. We'll find another way." There is no other way. Something desperate rose in her throat. Over the weeks, she'd grown accustomed to his presence, the way he chopped wood at dawn, humming old war songs under his breath, how he left wild flowers on the kitchen table without explanation, the careful distance he maintained, never pushing, never taking what she couldn't give. She'd begun to trust him. More dangerous still, she'd begun to want him. "If you go to town, you won't come back," she said. "And then what happens to us?" Ezra's eyes darkened. Slowly, deliberately, he reached up to cover her hand with his. His palm dwarfed hers, scarred and weathered, but infinitely gentle. "Then you take the horse and ride south. There's money hidden in the barn, enough to get you home." This is home. The word surprised them both. Catalina had spoken without thinking, but as they hung in the air between them, she realized they were true. In this rough cabin, with this dangerous, gentle man, she'd found something she thought was lost forever. Safety. Peace. The possibility of more. Catalina. His voice was rough, uncertain. She stepped closer, close enough to smell leather and wood smoke on his clothes, to see the pulse beating at his throat. They'd been dancing around this for weeks. The careful distance, the stolen glances, the way the air crackled when they moved through the small space together. "Stay," she whispered, and rose on her toes to brush her lips against his. The kiss was desperate, born of fear and longing, and the terrible knowledge that everything could end with the dawn. Ezra went rigid for a moment. Then his arms came around her, pulling her against the solid warmth of his chest. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I have to go," he said against her hair. "You know I do." She did know, just as she knew he might not return. That was the price of loving a wanted man in a lawless land. That night, with Elena's fever finally breaking and the child sleeping peacefully, Catalina went to Ezra's room. She found him sitting on the edge of the bed, cleaning his colt by lamplight. "You don't have to," he began. "I know." She closed the door behind her. "I want to." What happened next was born of desperation and desire. the knowledge that this might be their only night. His hands were reverent on her skin, tracing the curve of her waist, the swell of her breasts. She memorized the feel of him, the scars that mapped his body like a history of violence, the gentleness that contradicted everything his reputation suggested. When dawn came, she watched him dress in silence. Gun belt, hat, the long coat that would hide his weapons. "If I'm not back by sunset," he started, "you'll be back." She pulled the blanket up to cover herself but couldn't quite hide the tears. "You have to be." He kissed her one last time at the door, soft and sweet and full of promises neither of them could keep. Then he was gone, riding toward town and whatever fate waited there. Catalina stood at the window, watching until he disappeared into the heat shimmer of morning. Elena called out from the bedroom, fever finally broken, asking for water. Life went on, even when your heart rode away with a wanted man. The gunshots came at sunset, distant cracks echoing across the plains like thunder. Catalina's blood turned to ice. She pulled Elena close, both of them peering through the cabin's single window toward the town road. Dust clouds rose in the distance, riders coming fast. Too many riders. "Mama?" Elena's voice was small, frightened. "Shh, mija, stay quiet." But it wasn't the sheriff's posse that crested the hill. It was Ezra, hunched low over his horse's neck, blood dark on his shirt. Behind him rode 3 men with badges and rifles, closing fast. Catalina's heart hammered against her ribs. He'd gotten the medicine. She could see the small bottle clutched in his free hand. But at what cost? The cabin door burst open. Ezra stumbled inside, his face gray with pain and exhaustion. "They followed me from town. Sheriff's posse." He pressed the medicine into her hands, his fingers slick with blood. "Hide. Take Elena and hide." "I'm not leaving you." "God damn it, woman." "No." Catalina grabbed his face between her palms, forcing him to meet her eyes. "We stay together. All of us." Outside, hoofbeats thundered closer. Shouts of, "Surround the house," and "Blackwood, you're under arrest." Ezra's jaw worked. In his eyes, she saw the terrible calculation of a man who'd fought too many battles, lost too much. He was weighing their lives against his own and finding himself wanting. "The root cellar," she said quickly, "under the kitchen floor. Take Elena." "What about you?" She pulled her wedding ring from her finger, the simple band her first husband had given her a lifetime ago. "I'm going to buy us time." Before he could protest, she was at the door, smoothing her hair, arranging her torn dress to show more skin than propriety allowed. The kind of display that might distract men long enough for her family to escape. Her family. When had she started thinking of them that way? The posse leader was young, maybe 25, with a deputy's badge and hard eyes. "Ma'am, we're looking for Ezra Blackwood, armed killer. Might be holding you against your will." Catalina let her accent thicken, made her voice shake with fear. "Si, senor. He was here, but he left, maybe an hour ago. Rode east toward the river." "Search the house, boys." Her heart nearly stopped. But then Elena coughed, a small sick sound from somewhere beneath the kitchen floor, and one of the deputies paused. "Kid's sick," he said to his leader. "Probably fever." The young sheriff softened slightly. "You folks need medicine? We passed the doc in town. Said someone had robbed his supply." "My daughter," Catalina whispered, letting real tears fall. "She nearly died. That man, Blackwood, he stole medicine for her. I don't know why." It wasn't entirely a lie. She didn't fully understand why Ezra had risked everything for them, but she was grateful beyond words that he had. "Well, he's probably halfway to Mexico by now," the sheriff said finally. You see him again. You send word to town here. Si, senor. Of course. They searched the area around the cabin, but didn't think to check inside. Why would they suspect a woman would lie to protect a wanted man, especially one who'd supposedly held her captive? After they left, Catalina waited a full hour before lifting the loose floorboard. Ezra emerged first, bloody and shaking, then Elena, pale but alert. "Why?" Ezra asked, his voice hoarse. "Why didn't you turn me in?" Catalina helped him to a chair, began cutting away his bloody shirt to examine the wound. The bullet had creased his ribs. Painful, but not fatal. She'd seen worse. "Because," she said quietly, threading a needle by lamplight, "you risked your life for my daughter. For us. That makes you family." His hand caught hers, stilling her movements. "I can't stay. They'll keep looking. And next time we'll be ready." She met his gaze steadily. "Together." Something shifted in his eyes then, the hard shell of the solitary man cracking, letting in light. Love, hope, all the dangerous things he'd thought were dead. "Together," he repeated, like a prayer. That night, as Elena slept peacefully in the back room and Ezra's wound began to heal, Catalina lay in his arms and felt something she hadn't experienced since her husband's death. Home. 6 months later, the wanted posters had yellowed and torn, forgotten by all but the most dedicated lawmen. New criminals, new troubles. The frontier had a way of swallowing the past. Ezra still limped from that bullet, would carry the scar forever. But his hands were gentle as he taught Elena to read, patient as he helped Catalina tend their small garden. They lived quietly, carefully, far from towns and questions. Some evenings when Elena was asleep and the desert wind sang through the mesquite, Catalina would catch Ezra watching the horizon, the old restlessness, the soldier's habit of expecting trouble. "Worried?" she'd ask. "Always." His arm would tighten around her, but not about running anymore. She understood. They'd found something worth staying for, worth fighting for. Not perfection. Love was messier than the dime novels suggested, but real, solid, built on choice rather than circumstance. On her finger she wore a ring Ezra had carved from mesquite wood, simple and rough and honest as the man who'd made it. It caught the light sometimes, warm as the Texas sun, steady as the promise they'd made to each other, without words. They were family now, chosen, claimed, defended. And in the borderlands between Mexico and Texas, between outlaw and redemption, that was enough. The frontier was full of second chances for those brave enough to take them. What would you risk for love? For family? Hit that like button if this story moved you, and subscribe for more tales from the Wild West. Tell us in the comments. Have you ever had to choose between safety and love? We'll see you on the trail.